We're trying out a new video series here. We realized that within our typical long-form content, it's harder to get ideas out without spending a lot of time working on them. And within our shorter form content, the structure is a lot less specific and the points much more off the cuff. Personally, I've wanted to make a video myself for a while, and with the utter lack of anime content on this channel, I've been feeling a little stifled. Oh, hi, I'm Mochabyte, your resident anime analyst fluff. And my specific debut was supposed to be in a few weeks when we do our next animation-based essay, but I decided I was tired of waiting, to be honest. As essays have been hard to keep on a strict schedule considering the heavy themes and workload. Also, it's nice to make a video without so many of the heavy trigger warnings we need to put in most of our essays. Well, I did say most of the heavy triggers. Anyway, welcome to Fluffbits. Within the anime discourse for a while, mostly before we started making videos ourselves, I felt pretty attacked. We've mentioned it in other videos, but we definitely struggle with identity and media consumption. And so, when we really like a thing, sometimes someone tearing it down can definitely make us feel like we're being torn down. Although, we knew other folks in the community, not just anime fandom, but nerd community in general, tend to take this out on the whole community, standing their favorite works to the point of bullying folks at the slightest criticism, or basically taking a creator's intention as gospel and disregarding any contrary analysis. I never wanted to be that kind of person, so I only shared my ire with close friends and partners. Suffice to say, that still didn't work out too well. Not to mention that we were between a rock and a hard place, considering the AniTubers we watched criticized some of our favorite works, but we're not being disingenuous.
In episode 9, Kirito makes the baffling decision to hide the fact that he can dual wield from even his close friends, and allows the deaths of several people before deciding that it's time to step in and save them. It's never established why he can't tell anyone about this power, and he even explains that it's not something he learned from the beta, but just because it popped up in his skills list at some point. If anyone asked him about it, that's all he'd have to tell them, and sure enough, once he reveals it to the same friends he was hiding it from, there are no consequences. During his battle with the boss, Kirito had been taken down to low health solely because he hadn't revealed this power, and as soon as he did, he crushed the boss immediately, proving not only that he didn't learn his lesson, that hiding his powers would get people killed just like it did in episode 3, but also that he's so powerful at this point that he can only even compare to the next best players in the game if he severely limits himself.
Most of the time, we're very much agreeing with their points. Recently, even hbomberguy released a video talking about how disappointing RWBY is. As a longtime fan of RWBY, we knew full well that his points were on the level, and we felt it exemplified some growth on our part that we could talk about the video with others and come from a place of good faith and understanding, despite having essentially making RWBY such a salient part of our nerd identity for such a long time that it still had a sting. Full well knowing that many a RWBY fan would be very upset at seeing criticism for essentially a part of themselves put on such a large platform, as others have criticized the series on its flaws for years, but none with such a large or diverse audience, at least to my knowledge. In regards to one of my favorite anime, Sword Art Online, I was between a rock and a hard place even several years ago, because as we got heavily into the AniTube community, as a viewer, we soon realized that a lot of folks were making a name for themselves by analyzing Sword Art Online, and it was not through flattering analysis.
By now, it's no secret that Sword Art Online is terrible. It is so terrible that the fact that it's terrible is a meme. And that's a real shame, because Hunger Games Online with sword lasers is probably the best idea to come out of Japan, since ritually cannibalizing their enemies is an intimidation tactic during World War II. Look it up.
However, as upset as I was about the way the YouTube anime community was regarding SAO on a critical level, we couldn't deny the points. In particular, Mother's Basement had done a lot of work pointing out its flaws, and even downright misogynist moments in the series.
And the final battle where Sugo tears her clothes off and almost rapes her on camera is beyond excessive. And not only are these scenes just repugnant in concept, in practice they also focus on Asuna's body to the point where they're clearly going for fan service, which is much worse even than when they objectify Suguha. The audience is supposed to be horrified that this is happening, but the camera is trying to titillate the viewer. It's awful, borderline pornography, and that is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to problems with these scenes, but I don't even want to talk about them anymore. Fortunately, there is a pretty simple solution to this problem. Just don't fucking do it!
Now, Looking it back up, we see the anti-SAO criticism has kind of snowballed. However, as one of the most successful modern anime of its time, still releasing installments to this day, 7 years after its initial release, it's hard to say that SAO as a fandom or as a brand can't handle it. But like many who started into anime quite young, we didn't have the skills or life experience to really dig into the issues with many of the things we consumed at the time we became an anime fan. Plus, even though 7 years ago we were 21, we'd already taken on the affect of someone preemptively defending themselves from most criticism of things we like, considering weeb stuff was much more derided as an interest one should have, especially after a certain age. And although we are very analytical, it was just kind of an echo chamber in our own head. We were just happy that we felt so seen and impressed by its existence, especially the first season, which gets the least amount of criticism even now. The common take is that it started out great, blew its load too early, became a wish fulfillment harem, and coasted on its huge success instead of actually trying to improve. And I mean, in a capitalism ruins art sort of way, it's hard to disagree. Because once a media property has had such a huge foothold in an industry, telling great stories and trying to improve on the actual content is mostly unnecessary, especially when folks are making that media property an integral part of their identity, so much so that they'll beat away any detractors with a stick. Oh, and the harem formation of early SAO bothered me a lot less than it would have normally, considering I was also a deeply closeted, non-monogamous person. Not to mention, Kirito's unrequited love for most of the girls kind of mirrored how, in our life, growing up, we were seen as a ladies' man, because we had a bunch of female friends. Or at least everyone thought we had a lot of female friends. All that being said, there is something more to why I felt so enamored with SAO when I watched it, past the culture around it and the media consumption thing in general. We regarded it, at least partially, as a romance anime, not knowing at the time that it actually did count as one. We thought something that was romance couldn't be a shonen as well. Silly us. Now, this has two sides. The more common view of romance between characters, which definitely spoke to me as someone who wanted to explore romance in fiction, but knowing that my gender was policed enough that trying out anime more stereotypically girly wasn't as much of an option unless I wanted it to be my dirty little secret. On the other side of romance, however, was something I accepted about myself way more readily, even while LARPing as a guy, since we've always been considered quite sensitive, holding emotional resonance in very high regard. Even as much as we were trying to put on a show of being a guy, that gender policing was somewhat constant, as we failed to uphold the gender expectations we felt burdened with. But this happened so much less so in college that at the time we got into SAO, its themes of loving a game so much that you could be considered a cheater, of falling in love with someone you couldn't actually touch, and the idea of making friends you had to put distance between for their own protection, resonated with me to an absurdly high degree that would have previously been suppressed. Now, as a black person, and at the time a closeted queer person, the threat of dying on a whim is something I'd gotten quite used to. So, the final nail in the coffin of loving SAO came from the premise alone, being stuck in a game you could actually die in. However, your actual game skills are what could keep you alive. It was a very specific fantasy that spoke very deeply to me, although a few scenes in particular had really cemented this. Now, we mentioned our fear of dying alone at length in our birthday essay, but it's been a long ingrained sensibility for a long time. So Lisbeth and Kirito's brush with death that honestly resulted in trauma bonding was something of a revelatory moment for me, though I saw it as top-tier romance, the cherry on top being the beautiful accompaniment of the emotional energy by the end credits theme, Yumi Sekai. Yumi Sekai makes me cry, even now. It reminded me that the distance I put between people and myself, I might one day regret. It made me long for someone I wouldn't mind dying next to be by my side. This is a common motif in the early series, making the most of the life you have and the relationships you have before it's too late, as well as dealing with the guilt of surviving those you care about. This wasn't at all helped by the episode Crimson Killing Intent, in which Azuna's and Kirito's relationship was consummated by Azuna coming to Kirito's rescue during an assassination attempt by the Snuff Guild Laughing Coffin, in which they end up saving each other from certain death.
You fell for it, bitch!
I'm sorry. This was all my fault, wasn't it?
Asuna.
I'm sorry. But I should stay away from you. For your sake.
Asuna, my life belongs to you. I'll give it up for you. I want to stay with you until the end.
And I promise I'll do anything to protect you too. Forever. No matter what. I swear.
We saw this not only as an amazing amount of love shared between the two, but also as a moment shared between equals. They saved each other. We cried. And we rewatched the scene on a regular basis to remind ourselves of its impact, and strive to have a relationship that felt like that. Having someone which there was a mutual desire to watch the other's back, instead of simply one being taken care of by the other. I just didn't know at the time how much I wanted to be Azuna in that relationship. Go figure. Sword Art Online has a hell of an amount of flaws for sure, but it still has a very deep attachment for me. Although, recognizing those flaws and being able to like it anyway has been a struggle, especially in the sense that the whole fight and die by my side fixation came from a place of fear and trauma that we should have long examined before recently, as that hopeless romanticism has been a detriment to our growth as a person and our relationships in adulthood. It's important to be able to recognize and work through the disillusionment that occurs in the private echo chamber of one's mind, especially when you fall in love with a work wrought with concepts that pushes status quo, that encourages loving one person over all else and seeking love from a life or death headspace. I can't wait to return to these concepts and talk about SAO again in the future, but as for now, that's all there is to this heartfelt fluff bit. As always, everybody, take care of yourselves. And this has been Mocha logging out. Hi, new and old bites alike. It's me, Infantabite. First off, we'd like to thank our wonderful patrons, Jamie J, Sammy, 12 Face Productions, and valued customer. If you'd like to be added on the list of credits for our essays, and now, what are these called again? Fluffbits, then you can join our Patreon. You can join our Patreon. Anywho, nice to see all you bites. We are having some trouble with our latest video, but Mocha had been working on this one, so we thought we might as well treat y'all since we did have to push back The Last of Us essay another week. But expect more videos like this in the in-between times of our bigger uploads. If you're finding us for the first time, we also have a Twitch and a Ko-fi. We stream 3 days a week, and we play all sorts of games, like RPGs and horror games, but a lot of indies. Usually, we end up making videos about some of the stuff we play, though we do consider ourselves an anituber as well, so expect more anime videos to come. Although, after The Last of Us, we do have one more video game one before we have another animation long-form essay. And if you join our Patreon, you can get to vote on what it'll be. Hope you're all taking care of yourselves out there. It's a scary, scary world. But that's all for me. Have a good one, everybody!